So our study explored the representations of female captives and survivors of Boko Haram, an armed insurgent group settled in Nigeria, in what we define as a transmedia project formed by an ensemble of interconnected multimodal and media productions through merging photojournalism and humanitarian markets. And we also problematize the moralistic narratives that support this transmedia economy and try to propose alternative modes of sharing and consuming photojournalism. Yeah, so to briefly contextualize, the abduction and use of women and children for bombing mission by Boko Haram has been viewed as a war strategy, which began with the insurgency in 2009. Since then, many abductions have taken place, receiving unequal media coverage and leaving many of them unreported. So specifically, our research focused on two cases of abductions that took place in Maiduguri in September 2017 and in Chibok in April 2014. Both cases attract a wide media attention in the global north since they became part of interlocked photojournalistic reports commissioned by the New York Times on Boko Haram survivors. So this photo that you're seeing correspond to the Maiduguri project, and the following is part of the Chibok one. Next. Yeah, so taking this photojournalism project and the media activities it instigates, such as news stories, social media posts, and a humanitarian campaign as a case study, we explore the greater process of meaning making in which stories are developed and transformed as they circulate through diverse platforms. So regarding our methodological approach, well, in reconstructing the traversal narrative of Boko Haram survivors, we have opted to give an account of our embodied offline and online trajectory throughout this narrative as consumers of the representations that we end up studying. So the entry point to this study was the 2018 World Press Photo Contest, where the Maiduguri girls portrait, the first one I saw you, were awarded by this media group. We visited the exhibition and we were shocked by the visual presentations of the girls' stories, so we decided to investigate more this photojournalism project. We then identified the main social actors that were involved in the project, such as Walker's Photo, the photojournalist Adam Ferguson, and the New York Times, which commissioned the project. We then turned to their public Instagram pages, which is the prominent social media platform for the diffusion of photography, where we also identified lens culture as another important actor and came across a converging New York Times commissioned project by the same photojournalist, which is the Chibok girls portrait, the one I saw you. So having identified the broad picture, we start to pull the thread of the story by moving back in time to learn more about the logics of production and circulation of this mostly independent story, but also by real-time monitoring of the Instagram profiles of these media groups. So we digitally travel through hyperlinks from one platform to another, consuming and documenting the story. And then by decoding and assembling a one-year tracing, investigate the transformation of the semiotic and political value of the narrative over time. So in the figure, you can see the corpus assemblage. So what we found? Well, we found an online press on the Maiduguri girls, which Lucia will point out. Another two on the Chibok girls in April 2000. Yeah. So, and we also found Instagram publications promoting the different stages of the project and the achievement along the year. And also an interview with Adam Ferguson talking about the project, and finally a humanitarian campaign, which is the end of our track. But the most important, through the exploration of social media, we were able to discover the connection between the Maiduguri and the Chibok project. And also Instagram served as indicators of project peak times of activity, containing clues of the subsequent changes in of the traversal narrative. So following the launch of the project, we identified 3 peaks of activity within the traversal project, the transmedia project that we will refer later when discussing the analysis, but you can see the cycle. Regarding the tools for transmedia analysis, Lenke's concept of traversal has been very productive for addressing the meaning-making process in a digital media ecology. So for the analysis of our data, we draw primarily upon 2 concepts, which are recontextualization and re-symmetrization. And now Lucia will continue the analysis sections.
Okay. So in various instances across the transmedia project, journalists explicitly express their intention to dismantle what they identify as a dominant negative perception of female captives and survivors of Boko Haram. However, the NY Times article featuring the stories of 18 survivors from Maiduguri represents these girls' innocence and bravery together with dehumanizing portrayals of non-survivors as agents of terror and ultimately reinforces the harmful narratives that the journalists claim to contest with this project. One way that this distinction between the 18 survivors and the other captured women and girls is made is through the recontextualization of the actions that they perform and receive. So the featured survivors are consistently represented as passive receivers of Boko Haram's terror, while those who are unable to escape are represented as agents of this terror. In descriptions of non-survivors, this activation is achieved grammatically, with women and girls as the subjects of actions described, and also lexically, as we see here, with the label of suicide bombers, presupposing the deliberate action or deliberate desire and decision for death. So the article's retelling of the survivor stories not only highlights the innocence of these 18 girls, but also underscores their agency in escaping their deadly missions. Yet the representation of the girls as heroic survivors sets up a heroine versus villain dynamic through a meritocratic discourse praising the survivors' individual decisions and willpower in the act of escaping missions, while presupposing the same free choice among the, quote, dozens of others who have blown themselves up, and thus assumes non-survivors to be either accomplices of Boko Haram or, at best, victims with a lack of willpower to survive. Turning now to the visual representation of the 18 survivors in the article, we see how the article's textual representations are in some ways reinforced. Now, before going into this visual analysis, we consider it important to acknowledge the more polysemic nature of images when compared to text, and recognize that visual coding and decoding are culturally situated operations. In this case, the images are created by photojournalists from the West for primarily Western spectators of World Press Photo and New York Times, and our readings of gestures and other visual elements are also situated in this Western optic as researchers from Europe and North America. In line with the report's Girls as Victims narrative, we observe the visual victimization through static bodies facing walls or with lowered heads. And we also see idealized innocence alluded through Virgin Mary-like compositions of colors, tones, and body positions. The lines between victim and agent of terror are also blurred in the expression of fear and shame in the girls' corporal positioning, and terror is further mobilized by the dark shadows and their clothing, which represents the article's textual descriptions of female bombers. These visual features become even more relevant when the portrait series enters into the spotlight of the World Press Photo Competition, where images are the central mode of communication, accompanied by a short textual caption, primarily providing information on suicide bombers as Boko Haram's agents of escalating terror in Nigeria. This portrait of Aisha in the series was nominated for the 2018 World Press Photo of the Year, and it calls attention to the more ambiguous and open qualities of images and how contextual factors, such as the accompanying text, become crucial to the semiotic value of the visual elements in our study, as they are re-semioticized in distinct virtual and physical spaces across the transmedia project. On the one hand, according to visual grammar theory, this image represents Aisha through an empowering angle with the camera's frontal eye-level focus through which she confronts her viewer. Yet her occulted gaze rejects the possibility for engagement with a spectator, and her garment alludes to the possibility of concealed explosives. Visual representation of the girl as a potential threat is semiotically reinforced with the textual caption under the photograph, which replaces details of Aisha's survival with information of women and girls becoming Boko Haram's, quote, weapon of war. The photographer's promotion of his work on social media further points to the semiotic relevance of the linguistic signs within multimodal storytelling. So in a post on Ferguson's public Instagram page announcing the nomination for the World Press Photo of the Year with the image of Aisha, there is an emphasis on the girl's bravery in escaping, as well as dignity in the act of being photographed. So while these descriptions of dignity support a positive image of the girl, they also operate as self-promotional moves in that they represent the photojournalism project in a post-humanitarian light, where the photographer is the agent of dignification. And this is reflected in the followers' comments to this post, where we see a primary focus on the creator of the photographs rather than Aisha's experiences. An overwhelming majority of the comments direct the attention towards the photographer, congratulating and thanking him for his work. While there are a few comments directed towards Aisha and her story, there are very few, and those that do show this attention reflect the post's textual description of Aisha's bravery and details of her hardship and escape. And now Paloma will continue and talk a little bit about how this discourse of dignity is connected to the project on the Chibok survivors.
Thanks. So apart from shining a positive light on the photographer and his work, the lexical reference to that dignity used to describe the Maiduguri portraits function as intertext to the parallel media project Portraits of Dignity. The set of portraits on the two New York Times reports released in the second peak of activity of on the Chibok girls redirect the previously described narrative of terror and victimization of Boko Haram ex-captives towards a happy ending, in which survivors are rescued and dignified through portraits, as the photojournalist stated in one of the issues. Also, the explicitly chosen aesthetic features on the new portraits in terms of brightness, color, predominance of gaze or clothing, so a striking contrast between them and the Maiduguri girls' portraits. Next. Yeah. While Chibok survivors' portrait may contest the image of female bombers support through the Maiduguri project, once again we see how they do so under a neo-colonial post-humanitarian optic. Their stories are by the attention given in the last report of the journalist as the protagonist with the education. As we can see, the title of the report, how we photographed ex-captives, or in this picture, showing the making of the portraits. So the Chibok girls are dignified through standing still before a camera, while the photojournalists became the agents of this process in a white savior narrative that blurs the work of photojournalism with that of post-humanitarian action. Although the New York Times photojournalism stories on the Maiduguri and Chibok girls are separate projects in so much as they were carried out in different time frames and under distinct conditions, their interconnection, which is verified through intertextual and hyperlink reference within the New York Times publications and social media activity, is integral to the formation of the traversal narrative. So during key moments of social recognition, such as nominations and awards, these stories converge in the service of a singular narrative, as we see this converging again within the final peak in social media activity, yet this time returning to narratives of victimization. So our analysis suggests that this process correlates with promotional functions where the launching or success of one project publicizes the other, and supports self-promotional ends, with the spotlight on the photojournalist rather than the photographer girls, their experience, and the greater socio-political context in which their stories are immersed. So coming to the end of the analysis, the I Am Not a Weapon humanitarian campaign promoted in the third peak of social media activity further highlights the circular rather than linear process of a traversal narrative, in which meaning are not simply lost or gained, but also recycled as they are ascribed to different media products, forming the transmedia project. The I Am Not a Weapon interactive web page that you are seeing in the screen displays both images and audio videos of 9 of the mitochondrial survivors. However, in the recontextualization of the girls' stories with recycled images, we once again encounter semiotic threats. That could be the case image that we identified as a terror-inspiring portrait from the original photojournalism project, with Aisa's contextualized declaration of hope in the foreground, which clearly display her role as victim in need of Western intervention by emphasizing her vulnerability and desire for education. The neoliberal values upholding this campaign are not only evidenced by this priority given to education as a tool for optimizing the adherence to labor market, but also in the way through which the campaign is linguistically marked. Individualism and self-governance are prominent themes of the girls' future testimonies and the framing of the public art. When observing the I am trope of the campaign, a clear distinction can be made when the I am is used to represent minority girls' voices and when it refers to the interested collaborators. In the first case, it serves to negate negative conceptions such as I'm innocent, I'm courage, I'm not a weapon, while in the second, it is paired with actions rather than identities, such as I'm staying informed or I'm taking action. The salvation paradigms which underpins the I Am Not a Weapon campaign not only promotes a political, ironic engagement with others, but also reflects what Helen Behrens identifies as a neo-colonial patriarchal relationship in which humanitarian and social media campaigns of the West save girls from deteriorating hands in the global South. So now Lucia will continue with a closing reflection.
All right, so in reconstructing the traversal narrative of Boko Haram survivors, in this study we encounter neoliberal logics driving production and circulation as crucially bound to post-humanitarian dispositions and a gendered neocolonial relationship. Our analysis of female survivor stories repackaged across media platforms points to a trend of spectacle renewal in which recycled textual and visual elements function as intertexts of forthcoming or parallel spectacles that consolidate the transmedia project, while at times also resulting in semiotic inconsistencies. Throughout this process, Western media actors are upheld as bearers of truth and morality, but rather than deconstructing reductionist and polarizing portrayals of Boko Haram captives and survivors, these narratives are reinforced through a transmedia project that empowers Western producers and consumers. As researchers from the Global North, we do not intend to offer lessons on how women and girls from Nigeria should be represented. Instead, we seek to promote reflection on the broader need for less moral missions and more critical engagement with the discourses we produce and consume. This involves questioning the type of empowerment and interaction that media and humanitarian markets claim to promote, that which is often achieved, and the critical work that this implies for those who seek a more equal and just world. So as a fruitful starting point for proactive thought on this issue, we turn to our own experiences as followers and consumers of the traversal narrative of this study, where our trajectories through physical exhibits and online media and social media platforms left little opportunity for critical interaction. We consider the imagination of new forms of storytelling that make collective participation central to the construction of meaning to be key for initiatives seeking to promote critical engagement with media stories in both physical and virtual spaces. Instead of silence and individual contemplation as the primary mode of consuming photojournalism and exhibits, offering participative guided visits that promote a better understanding of the story, may encourage viewers' critical engagement with the multimodal narratives and awareness of their roles as media consumers and global citizens. While in our research we discovered that some centers hosting the World Press Photo Contest did organize visits, these were primarily focused on the artistic and technical aspects of the featured photographs. Although digital technologies and social media platforms in particular allow interaction with the media shared in this virtual space, our experience following the Instagram pages of the various actors in our study reaffirmed the fan page nature of this platform, with like as the only quick response available and comments primarily praising photojournalists and reflecting on the aesthetic qualities of photographs. Yet we believe that social media can enrich the meaning-making process and through collective sharing of opinion and information, and its possibilities as a productive medium for the interactive circulation of photojournalism projects should be further explored. While our study contains limitations, particularly due to our decision to focus strictly on the information available to consumers, we attempt to go beyond common critical approaches that analyze discursive representations as isolated incidents in order to explore them as part of a complex web of transmedia products with diverse communicative contexts, determining the stories that matter and how they are told. Thank you.